We turn now to the man trying to lead his party to victory this November, House Republican leader John Boehner of Ohio. He joins us this morning from Cincinnati. Leader Boehner, welcome back to us.
David, good morning.
I want to continue on the Gulf Coast bill as we near completion of this, and you heard Carol Browner's comments. I want to pick up on holding BP accountable. Do you think the government should pursue negligence claims against BP?
I think the government should do everything they possibly can to bring this crisis to an end. And that means going after BP, enforcing the laws that are on the books, and restoring the Gulf to its original condition. I think BP has stepped forward in terms of the money that they've put forward so far. But there is the law, and they should be held accountable.
The question, however, also extends to, in terms of revitalizing the Gulf Coast, this issue of the moratorium on deep water drilling. You heard Carol Browner concede the White House didn't do an economic analysis into the industries along the Gulf Coast. Should that moratorium be lifted by this point?
I believe the moratorium should be lifted. We've been drilling in the Gulf Coast now for 60 years. There are 40,000 wells operating in the Gulf Coast. There clearly was a mistake made with regard to this one well. But I think that we're risking 100,000 jobs in the Gulf Coast with the continuation of this moratorium. And I do believe that there are enough practices in place, enough safety precautions in place to allow this drilling to continue, because if we're serious about moving toward energy independence, we need to do all of the above. Which includes exploration for more oil and gas in the United States of America.
There seems to be some bipartisan agreement about this point when it comes to the Gulf oil spill and in terms of the permits being issued. There was a failure of regulation. When it comes to the Wall Street collapse, the financial system collapse, a failure of regulation. And yet you said something in July that caught my attention about a moratorium on regulations. You said, I think having a moratorium on new federal regulations is a great idea. It sends a wonderful signal to the private sector that they're going to have some breathing room. Do you think that's what the private sector needs now, is breathing room?
I do think the private sector needs some breathing room. When you look at all of the uncertainty that's being created by the Democrats' agenda, they've got every employer in America, every investor in America scared to death, and they're frozen. When you look at what happened in Wall Street, when you look at what happened in the Gulf, it wasn't that we didn't have enough regulations. What we didn't have was enough enforcement by the federal bureaucrats in charge of pursuing these things. The SEC could have done a lot more with regard to the financial meltdown, except they didn't. It's pretty clear that those bureaucrats charged with inspecting these wells didn't do their job. So it's not more regulations. How about we enforce the ones we have now?
Let me talk about, on the subject of regulations and the broader economy, the job numbers that came out Friday were disappointing. The private sector job growth is anemic at best. And yet the president says he is not fearful of a so-called double-dip recession. What do you say?
Well, I'm concerned about the state of the economy. It's pretty clear that over the last 3 months, the economy has paused. And it's also pretty clear the American people are still demanding and asking the question, where are the jobs? And the reason we don't have new jobs is because of the job-killing agenda pursued by President Obama and his allies in the Congress. They really do have employers scared to death. I've been all over my district over the last several days. I was in a couple of my neighboring states. I talked to a lot of employers who just are fearful of what's coming next out of Washington. It's all the spending, it's all the debt. It's their national energy tax. They want to call it cap and trade. More mandates, higher costs, more taxes. Their health care bill. More mandates, higher costs, higher taxes. And if all that isn't bad enough, they want to raise the taxes on the American people. It's no wonder that employers are frozen.
Let's talk about it. It's interesting. You talk in the debt, the importance of covering government spending, and you worry about the Democrats raising taxes. The Obama administration wants to extend the Bush tax cuts only for those who make less than $250,000, and he wants to let them expire for those wealthy Americans making more than that. You're opposed to that. You want to extend the tax cuts, and the Republican leadership does. But Alan Greenspan, who was on this program last week, chairman of the Federal Reserve, said that's the wrong idea. Here's what he said.
Look, I'm very much in favor of tax money. And the problem that we've gotten into in recent years is spending programs with borrowed money, tax cuts with borrowed money, and at the end of the day, that proves disastrous. And my view is I don't think we can play subtle policy here.
You don't agree with Republican leaders who say tax cuts pay for themselves?
They do not.
Leader Boehner, he puts it right to you.
The only way we're going to get our economy going again and solve our budget problems is to get the economy moving, get more people back to work where they can care for their own families, and begin to expand the tax rules to bring more revenue to the federal government. And what we have to do is we have to get our arms around the spending spree that's going on in Washington, D.C.
But Leader Boehner, I'm sorry, you're not being
problem.
responsive to a specific point, which is how can you be for cutting the deficit and also cutting taxes as well when they're not paid for?
Listen, you can't raise taxes in the middle of a weak economy without risking a double dip in this recession. President Obama's favorite Republican economist, Mark Zandi, came out several weeks ago and made it clear that raising taxes at this point in the economy is a very bad idea.
But do you agree that tax cuts cannot be paid for?
Without help.
But tax cuts are not paid for. Is that correct?
I am not for raising taxes on the American people in a soft economy.
That's not the question,
and
Leader
the people
Boehner.
that
The
the
question
president
is,
wants to tax.
are tax cuts paid for or not?
Listen, what you're trying to do is get into this Washington game, and they're funny accounting over there. You cannot get the economy going again by raising taxes on those people who we expect to create jobs in America and to get the economy going again. If we want to solve the budget problem, we've got to have a healthy economy, and we have to get our arms around the runaway spending that's going on in Washington, D.C.
I just want to clarify this. I mean, I'm relying on what Chairman Greenspan said. Maybe if you're accusing him of funding Washington games, he says that tax cuts that aren't paid for are not cutting the deficit. That they are not actually paid for. It's borrowed money. And so, do you believe tax cuts pay for themselves or not?
I do believe that we've got to get more money in the hands of small businesses and American families to get our economy going again. And the only way to get that economy going again is to do that and to get our arms around the spending.
All right.